In the first lesson about the fuel cell, we have described basically the main feature, the reasons for which fuel cells are so interesting green technology, and we have focused our attention on basically the compositions of the gas diffusion electrode in fuel cell, the membrane electrode assembly, and so basically the interactions between these gas diffusion electrode and the membrane, and actually the proton exchange membrane. We have also defined basically the main reactions involved and the working principle of a proton exchange membrane fuel cell based on hydrogen as fuel. But now what we can say is that basically the proton exchange membrane fuel cell are not only based on the use of hydrogen as fuel, but we can even explore the use of liquid fuel as methanol. So in this case we need to define, for instance, the possibility to observe different types of fuel cell based on a PEM, based on a proton exchange membrane. And one of these is the direct methanol fuel cell with this sigma. So we have direct methanol fuel cell. The direct methanol fuel cell is basically a fuel cell based on a proton exchange membrane in which the fuel is not gaseous hydrogen, this is liquid methanol, and in particular is liquid methanol in a water solution, is liquid methanol 1 molar. So basically we are looking about the 3% in weight of methanol in water as a fuel. So the use of this liquid fuel, even if is associated with some problems concerning mostly the energetic specific energy due to the fact that we need to use diluted methanol, and so the amount of reagent is reduced due to the fact that we need to have water. But we have a lot of interesting advantages with respect to the use of hydrogen, because we know the problems connecting the stability of hydrogen in different environmental conditions, and also the safety problem connected with the use of this particular flammable reagent also. And so in order to increase the safety way in which these batteries works, we can pass from the gaseous hydrogen to the liquid methanol, to water solutions of methanol. So the working principle is quite the same. So if we want to define the overall structure, again, we have our anode, our negative electrode, in which platinum particles are used in order to promote the oxidations and both the reduction. We will see how in direct methanol fuel cell it is important also to observe the presence of rhodium together with platinum, and we will see why. And again we have our positive electrode, the cathode. So again, we have a gas diffusion electrode, so let's make here the external circuit. We have our gas diffusion electrode, and so oxygen is taken from outside. But in this case, oxygen is taken from the outside, and here we have the fuel, and the fuel in this case is not anymore hydrogen, but in this case is methanol. So is methanol together with water. Why? Because it's methanol in a solution. It's 1 molar methanol. And why it's so, and this is a classic proton exchange membrane that allows the passage of H+, but only H+, without allowing the passage of electrons are collected from the external circuit. So why water is so important? Water is mandatory in these types of fuel cell, the direct methanol fuel cell. Why? Because basically, if we want to define now the Choosimi reaction, the oxidations of the methanol is due to the presence of water. So we have the methanol plus water that lead to the release of carbon dioxide plus 6H plus 6 electrons. So basically we need to have water that is mandatory in order to ensure the oxidations of methanol. And so we are producing H plus that can migrate toward the gas diffusion electrode, and on the surface of the catalyst present in this gas diffusion electrode together with oxygen we can have the reductions of heat and the generation of water as a product. So basically we have oxygen plus 6 electrons plus 6H plus, this is balanced, and we can have 3 water, and again water is created as a product. So we are entering with water in order to promote the oxidations of methanol. We are achieving the oxidation and the release of H plus that can migrate inside this proton exchange membrane. In direct methanol fuel cell we are always taking again as proton exchange membrane, since this Nafion membrane is responsible for the migration of these protons. And when these protons reach in the gas diffusion electrode with the well-precise structure previously defined in the last lesson, the surface of the catalyst, we have that these protons together with the electrons, together with the oxygen, can react on the surface of platinums and promote the formations of water. What is important is that in the oxidation step, as a byproduct, we have the formations of carbon dioxide that is removed. And this is the reason for which it's so important to use electrodes that are not only in platinum, but also in rhodium. See, the rhodium, even if it's quite expensive, is necessary in order to decrease the poisoning effect due to the presence of CO2 that could be absorbed on the surface of the platinum catalyst particles. And so what is important to say is that since here the CO2 is a real product of the reaction, and so we can have a lot of CO2 close to the surface of these particles of platinum, it's important to introduce also rhodium in order to avoid these types of poisoning effects. And basically this is for what concerns direct methanol fuel cell. And one of the most important problems, even if we have some advantages connected to safety, in which this battery is created with respect to the conventional ones using hydrogen as a fuel, but we have also some problems, and these problems are the quite expensive cost of platinums and rhodium, is the fact that we have a quite pure energetic density, since water is mandatory together with the methanol, and we have even at the same time some problem concerning the passage of methanols that can reach the oxygen with a reduction of DDP. So we have a gas crossover. In this case it's not a real gas crossover because the methanol is not gas. We have just a methanol crossover from this anode toward the cathode through the polymer, to the proton exchange membrane. And this is for what concerns the direct methanol fuel cell. Now it's important to describe the last types of, obviously without speaking about high temperature fuel cell, we will describe the high temperature fuel cell in the last lessons concerning fuel cell. But now we are focusing on the last type of traditional fuel cell, and is a fuel cell based on an ionic exchange membrane. So an ionic exchange membrane. And the cell takes the names of alkaline anionic exchange membrane fuel cell. Alkaline anionic exchange membrane fuel cell. Because a fuel cell, until now, we have described only fuel cell having a proton exchange membrane, because it was necessary to vehiculate the transport of H plus in order to ensure the closing of the circuit. But it's often, sometimes, we can even exploit the use of an ionic exchange membrane in which what can pass through the membrane, separating this membrane, is not H plus, but OH minus. And this is important because with the use of these tricks and the use of these different types of approach, for instance in methanol, in direct methanol fuel cell, we can promote a movement of ions in an opposite way with respect to the possible crossover of the methanols. And so we are reducing, for instance, the crossover of the methanol. But now, let's try to describe what is the structure. And at the very beginning, it's important to say that an ionic exchange membrane can be used in fuel cell even based with hydrogen as fuel, and even based with methanol as fuel. So if we want to describe, for instance, the structure, we have our hydrogen, or it could be methanol, it doesn't matter. So the only thing that is changing is basically the product of the reaction. If the hydrogen is used in ionic exchange membrane, the product of the oxidation is water. If methanol is used as fuel in ionic exchange membrane, the product is carbon dioxide. Then we have our membrane. This membrane is, we know, really different, since it could be, for instance, a modified Nafion or other types of exchange membrane. So it's an ionic exchange membrane, able to promote the passage of not H plus, but OH minus in the opposite direction. And we have here the well-known positive electrode, gas diffusion electrode, able to promote the taking of oxygen from the atmosphere. But what is interesting in this case is that together with oxygen in an ionic exchange membrane, also water is introduced. So we have not only oxygen that is introduced, but also water. And at the same time, we have water released as a product of the oxidation. Why? Because basically when we are closing the circuit, in the negative pole, let's focus our attention on the use of hydrogen. We have that hydrogen can react with the OH minus generated as a product of the reduction 2 times, and we have 2 electron release plus 2 of water. Whereas on the positive electrode, we have that oxygen react with water and the electrons received in order to promote the formations of these anions as a product that can migrate and use by hydrogen in order to ensure the oxidations and release water as a product of the reaction. So basically the concept is this. In this case we are using a different types of membrane, and we are using waters together with oxygen in order to allow a working principle that is different, but the result is exactly the same. So an interesting aspect is also the possibility to use this technology for a fuel of methanol. So in this case, for instance, we have methanol that is reacting together with this species, 6OH minus, in order to give CO2, 5 water, and 6 electrons. And these 6 electrons are collected by oxygen in order to promote the formations of these 6OH minus. So basically, what is important is that, again, we have as a product CO2, since we are using methanol, but again we have also water as a product, and in this case we have the oxygen reduction reaction with the generation of the species that can veiculate toward the negative pole, in this case acting as an anode, in order to allow the oxidation. And since we are moving with an ion in an opposite way with the theoretical pathway that methanol should have in order to allow a crossover, the crossover is quite limited. And this is an extremely interesting positive aspect. It's important also to the fact that at the very beginning, these types of fuel cell alkaline fuel cell was designed with the use of an alkaline electrolyte as a potassium hydroxide solution. But this was a bad thing for us. We have some leaks, and at the same time also the carbonylation effect. We can have some evaporations of water and so on. So the use of an anionic exchange membrane have completely replaced that types of technology, because we are able to limit the methanol crossover. We are avoiding the carbonylation effect, and at the same time we have a control in the management of water that is really better.